Before I get into this episode, folks, I need to make something very clear. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I sit somewhere in the middle, like a lot of Americans who are tired of picking between two flavors of the same broken system. I vote based on policy and individual characteristics of one person and certain traits that they exemplify, so to speak. I look at what people do, not just what they say. And right now, I'm looking at what's happening in Virginia under Governor Abigail Spanberger, and I don't like what I see. I've spent weeks researching this woman, digging through campaign finance records, reading her voting history, looking at who funds her, looking at what she's actually done versus what she claims to stand for. And what I have found, well, let's just say there's a pattern here that Virginians need to understand. This episode isn't about partisan politics. It's about the facts. It's about following the money. It's about looking at someone's record and asking, does this person have ulterior motives? Is this person going to do what's best for Virginia? Or what's best for the people who fund her campaigns? I'm going to lay it all out. The good, the bad, and the deeply concerning. And then you can make up your own mind. Having said, welcome to the Manufactured Mind, folks. I'm your host, Robey. Let's dive right in. I hope everybody's having a wonderful day today. It's a beautiful day here in Virginia. The ice is finally starting to melt, thank goodness, and it's much, much warmer temperatures today. Having said, so, the vetting process. When someone applies for a security clearance in this country, they go through an exhaustive vetting process. They fill out an SF-86, a questionnaire that asks about every job you've ever had, every place you've ever lived, every foreign contact you've ever made. Investigators dig deep into your background. They talk to your neighbors. They look for anything that might compromise your judgment or your loyalty. Abigail Spanberger went through that process. She was a CIA case officer for 7 years. She had one of the highest security clearances in the country. But here's the thing. Getting a security clearance doesn't mean you're above scrutiny. Doesn't mean we just trust you forever. Public servants, especially those seeking the highest office in a state, should be vetted by the people they want to serve. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to vet Governor Abigail Spanberger the same way she would vet an asset in the field. We're going to look at her background, her associations, her funding sources, her voting record, and her actions since taking office. And I'm going to be honest with you. Some of what I found does not add up. So let me start with the basics, folks. Abigail Davis Spanberger was born in 1979 in Red Bank, New Jersey. Her father was a police officer who later became a federal postal inspector. She graduated from the University of Virginia and got an MBA from a joint program between Gizma Business School in Germany and Purdue University. After college, she worked as a postal inspector herself, focusing on money laundering and narcotics cases. In 2006, she joined the CIA as a case officer, working overseas on counterterrorism operations until 2014. On paper, this is an impressive resume, I must admit. Law enforcement background, intelligence community experience, the kind of credentials that should inspire confidence, but credentials aren't character, and a resume isn't a record. So let's look at the record. In late 2002, while waiting for her CIA security clearance to come through, Abigail Spanberger took a job as a substitute teacher at a school in Northern Virginia called the Islamic Saudi Academy. This school was fully funded and controlled by the Saudi Arabian government. By the time Spanberger started working there, it was already controversial. So let me walk you through what was publicly known about the school before Spanberger took the job. In March 1997, the Washington Post reported that Mousa Mohammed Abu Marzouk, the first chairman of Hamas's political bureau, had sent his children to this school. Hamas was designated as a foreign terrorist organization by the State Department later that very same year. In October 1998, the Washington Post reported that the school's comptroller, Ismail Salim El-Barasi, had been arrested for refusing to testify before a grand jury investigating money laundering. He shared bank accounts with the Hamas leader. 2004 search of his home provided key evidence in the Holy Land Foundation terrorism financing case. In February 2002, months before Spanberger took the job, the Washington Post reported on the school's textbooks. They contained passages stating that the day of judgment will come when Muslims start attacking Jews. One 11th grade textbook reportedly stated that Jews will hide behind trees, and the trees will say, "O Muslim, O servant of God, here is a Jew hiding behind me. Come here and kill him." Wow. In March 2002, again, before Spanberger started working there, CNN and the Washington Post reported that 2 recent graduates had been denied entry to Israel because authorities suspected they were planning a suicide attack. This wasn't some hidden controversy. This was in major newspapers. The school earned the nickname Terror High. The school's 1998 valedictorian, Ahmed Amar Abu Ali, was later convicted in 2005 of plotting the Al-Qaeda to assassinate President George W. Bush. He received a 30-year prison sentence. That's rather light for plotting to assassinate a president, in my eyes, but okay. Even Senator Chuck Schumer, a Democrat, called for a federal investigation into the school in 2005, warning about its continued association with individuals linked to terror and the teaching of hateful ideology. Now, Spanberger's defense. She says she was just a substitute English teacher filling in for someone on maternity leave. She says she taught normal kids, whatever that means, and had nothing to do with the school's ideology. She says she disclosed the job to her CIA recruiters and updated her SF-86 to include it. She passed a subsequent background check. And look, I'm going to be fair here, folks. Teaching English at a school doesn't make you responsible for what the school teaches in other classes. The CIA cleared her, which means investigators at the time didn't see it as disqualifying. But here's what bothers me. When Spanberger first ran for Congress in 2018, her campaign biography did not mention this job. A May 2018 interview with the Richmond Times-Dispatch mentioned she was a substitute teacher at a private school during this period, but did not specify which school. The connection only came to light through opposition research and Freedom of Information Act request. So why wasn't she upfront about it? If it's no big deal, if she was just teaching English to kids and had nothing to hide, why not put it in her campaign bio? Why describe it vaguely as a private school? When you're trying to hide something, you raise more questions than if you'd just been transparent from the start. Now, I'm not saying Spanberger is a terrorist sympathizer. I'm saying this episode reveals a pattern. She presents one image to voters while obscuring details that might complicate that image. And that pattern shows up again and again. So throughout her time in Congress, Abigail Spanberger positioned herself as a moderate, a centrist, a blue dog Democrat, someone who works across the aisle. She publicly criticized her own party after Democrats lost seats in 2020. There's a leaked recording of her on a caucus call saying that the party would, quote, get fucking torn apart in 2022, end quote, if they didn't change course. She told Democrats to, quote, never use the word socialist or socialism ever again, end quote. The Lugar Center ranked her as the fifth most bipartisan member of the House based on her bill co-sponsorship patterns. Sounds moderate, right? Now, look at her actual voting record. According to 538, Abigail Spanberger voted for President Biden 100% of the time on the 73 bills where Biden took a clear position. 100%. Not 95%, not 90%, 100%. The AFL-CIO, the major labor union federation, gave her a 95% lifetime progressive score. Heritage Action for America, a conservative group that tracks voting records, gave her a 5% rating. That's not 5% conservative, that's 5% alignment with conservative positions. She scored lower than the average House Democrat. The Institute for Legislative Analysis conducted a study of her voting record and categorized her as extreme progressive on immigration, on crime, and on spending. So let me give you some specific examples. On immigration, she voted against the Lincoln-Riley Act, the bill named after a young woman who was raped and murdered by an illegal immigrant. The bill would have required ICE to detain illegal immigrants arrested for burglary, theft, and other crimes. 37 House Democrats voted for it. Spanberger voted no. How disgusting. That's insane to me. And I'm pretty sure this woman has daughters, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong on that. And you vote no? What is wrong with you, lady? I don't get it. She voted against the Schools Not Shelters Act, which would have prohibited housing illegal immigrants in schools near children. She voted against the Protecting Our Communities from Failure to Secure the Border Act, which would have prohibited federal funds from housing illegal immigrants. And on crime, she voted against a bill that would have defined the maximum age of a youth offender as 18, which would have stopped Washington, D.C.'s policy of treating violent criminals up to age 25 as juveniles. On spending, according to the Institute for Legislative Analysis, her voting record on federal spending was farther to the left than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC, on several key votes. Now, I want to be fair here. Some of these votes have nuance. Politicians often vote against bills because of specific provisions rather than the overall concept. Okay? And Spanberger said she opposed the Lincoln-Riley Act because it imposed costly burdens on localities and stripped away due process. But if someone has a clear criminal background, and don't forget, folks, if you're here illegally, that is a crime, okay? So, what is their need for due process if you were here illegally already, which is a crime in itself? Not to mention, if you have a substantial criminal record of rape, murder, sexual assault, whatever it may be. Due process should be out the window at that point, and these people need to be removed. Plain and simple. If you are here illegally, keyword illegally, that is a crime. But here's the pattern. She talks like a moderate, but votes like a progressive. Consistently. Reliably, 100% of the time when it mattered to Biden. Either she's genuinely progressive and the moderate talk is a performance for swing voters, or she's a follower who votes with her party, no matter what. Neither is particularly reassuring. So, let's follow the money. If you want to understand a politician, follow the money. Abigail Spanberger raised approximately $72 million for her gubernatorial campaign, one of the most expensive races in Virginia history. Let's look at where that money came from. So, out-of-state donors. More than 50% of Spanberger's campaign funds came from outside Virginia. Out-of-state billionaires and political action committees poured money into her race. Her top individual donor, Reid Hoffman, the billionaire founder of LinkedIn, $350,000. Hoffman is one of the Democratic Party's biggest mega donors. He spent $1 million paying the legal bills of Fusion GPS, the firm behind the discredited Steele dossier. Wow. Wow. The Democratic Governors Association gave millions. And then there's the Clean Virginia and the Dominion paradox. Spanberger's biggest donor relationship was with Michael Bills and his organization, Clean Virginia. Bills is a hedge fund founder from Charlottesville who started Clean Virginia specifically to combat Dominion Energy's influence in Virginia politics. Through the election cycle, Bills and Clean Virginia contributed approximately $6.45 million to support Spanberger and other Democrats. Spanberger pledged not, keyword not, to accept money from Dominion Energy during her campaign. That sounds principled, right? Take on the big utility company, refuse their money. Except here's what happened after she won. Spanberger's inaugural committee accepted $100,000 from Dominion Energy. How hypocritical. The same company she supposedly opposed. The same company Clean Virginia exists to combat. Her inaugural committee also accepted $142,675 from Altria, the parent company of Philip Morris, one of the largest tobacco companies in the world. $100,000 from Amazon, $100,000 from Philip Morris International, $100,000 from Capital One, and $100,000 from the Sports Betting Alliance. A VCU political science professor said this undermines people's faith in democratic system. You can't claim to be a national security expert while taking money. Let me back up there. So she campaigns as the anti-corporate candidate who refuses Dominion money, then takes Dominion money the moment she wins. She pledged to refuse corporate PAC money during her congressional campaigns, but her inaugural committee was funded by major corporations. That's not principled. That's a loophole. And here's the big one. The CCP connection. So let's talk about something that should concern every Virginian. In April and May of 2025, Spanberger's gubernatorial campaign accepted $50,000 in donations from Pin Ni, the president of Wanzhang America, the U.S. arm of Chinese automotive conglomerate Wanzhang Group. Pin Ni has been recognized as an outstanding Communist Party member by his company 15 times. 15 times, folks. The company's late founder, Lu Guanqiu, Pin Ni's father-in-law rather, was posthumously awarded the title of, quote, National Outstanding Communist Party Member, end quote, in 2021. The company praised him for his pursuit of communism as a lifelong ideal and practice. Wanzhang Group owns Karma Automotive, an electric vehicle company. Spanberger has supported EV mandates and tax credits, policies that would directly benefit Wanzhang's business. Virginia law forbids foreign nationals from making political contributions. Chinese law typically bans CCP members from holding foreign citizenship or permanent residency. There are legitimate questions about whether this donation was even legal. The National Legal and Policy Center said they plan to file a complaint with the Federal Elections Commission. Now, in fairness, Penny has also donated to Republicans, including the Republican National Committee. He's apparently been in the U.S. since at least 1992 and may be a legal permanent resident or citizen. Both parties have taken his money. But here's what makes Spanberger's acceptance particularly concerning. She built an entire political brand on her CIA credentials and national security expertise. She touts herself as a hawk on China. And then she takes $50,000 from a businessman who, with documented ties to the Chinese Communist Party. You can't claim to be a national security expert while taking money from people connected to America's primary geopolitical adversary. That's not principled leadership. That is hypocrisy, folks, at its finest. So, moving on, let's talk about what Governor Spanberger is actually doing now that she's in office. Her very first major action was Executive Order 10, signed January 17th, 2026, her first full day in office. This rescinded Governor Youngkin's Executive Order 47, which had directed Virginia State Police and the Department of Corrections to cooperate with federal immigration authorities, as they should. Then on February 4th, she went even farther. She signed Executive Directive 1, which ordered all state law enforcement agencies to terminate their existing 287G agreements with ICE. These are the agreements that allowed state and local officers to be trained and deputized to assist with immigration enforcement. She also signed Executive Order 12, establishing policing principles. State Virginia agencies shall not engage in fear-based policing, enforcement theater, or actions that create barriers to people seeking assistance. What the hell is she doing? These people that are seeking assistance are the very ones that are illegal and criminals in a lot of cases. Not all, but a lot. So why would you want to do this? And then she cited the deaths of two U.S. citizens killed by ICE agents in Minneapolis. And look, if ICE agents killed innocent American citizens through negligence or misconduct, that's terrible, and those agents should be accountable. But here's my problem with her logic. Being here illegally is a crime. I don't understand why this is controversial. If you entered this country without authorization, you broke the fucking law. Period. End of discussion. It doesn't matter if you haven't committed a violent crime. The act of being here illegally is itself a violation of federal law. And when politicians talk about immigrants who, quote, haven't committed violent crimes, as if that makes them harmless, they're ignoring the fundamental issue. They committed a crime by coming here illegally. That is a crime. This is ridiculous. And as far as the Minneapolis incidents, folks, listen, the lady blatantly, purposefully did what she did in that vehicle and tried to run over the ICE agent to provoke him to shoot her so that this right here could all be said, so that they could use it as fuel for their fucking fire. And it's disgusting. And then the other gentleman that got killed had kicked the taillight out of a federal vehicle as it was moving. And you gotta kick pretty fucking hard to kick the damn taillight out, I would argue, out of a fucking SUV at that. So they had already had a confrontation with this individual. And then the next time he came to a protest, he brought a fucking gun. a pistol that is well known for misfiring, which actually leads me to question why he specifically brought that gun. Did he specifically intend, knowing that it was well documented that this weapon is known for misfiring very, very easily? Because in Texas, there's a police department, and maybe all of Texas, but in Texas, they removed those pistols from law enforcement officers because of the misfiring. So this is a well-documented case about this specific pistol, that it has malfunction issues with misfiring very, very easily. And that is seemingly what happened. But the dude shouldn't have brought the gun in the first place. And his family even told him not to go, not to get involved. But he persisted. And he suffered the consequence. You play with fire, you get fucking burned. It's that simple. And I know many people aren't gonna like what I'm saying here, but it's just a fucking fact. Okay? So now, let's talk about the Second Amendment. The Virginia legislature just passed the most aggressive gun control package in state history, and Governor Spanberger is going to sign it. Here's what is in the package. Assault weapons ban, House Bill 217 and Senate Bill 749 would ban the sale, manufacture, purchase, or transfer of semi-automatic rifles with features like pistol grips, folding stocks, or threaded barrels. This captures the AR-15 platform and similar firearms. The Senate version sets magazine limits at 15 rounds, the House version at 10 rounds. Other measures: ghost guns ban, firearm industry liability, mandatory secure storage, 11% excise tax on firearms and ammunition, SB 763. Restrictions on firearms in mental health facilities and higher education buildings. Now, the Senate version does include a grandfather clause. If you already own these firearms or magazines, you can keep them. That's an improvement from the earlier version that would have made current owners criminals overnight. But here's what people don't understand. Even with grandfathering, you can never sell, transfer, or give these firearms to anyone. When you die, they have to be surrendered. Your children cannot inherit them. This is delayed confiscation. They're just waiting you out. They are literally impeding on our Second Amendment rights. They want to disarm the population. Why? Because the Second Amendment is the most fundamental, valued amendment for us to fight back if it ever were to come to that. And God forbid that it ever comes to that. But this is why the Founding Fathers made this very clear, that we have the right to bear arms. This is why when I took my oath to the Marine Corps, I took an oath to protect this country against both foreign and domestic terrorists. And they are trying to take our Second Amendment rights away, folks. Slowly but surely. And Virginians, we should be absolutely livid about what she's doing with this shit. But here's what really gets me about these laws. The politicians pushing gun control have armed security. Governor Spanberger has a security detail with weapons. The legislators voting for these bills have Capitol Police protection. The wealthy donors funding gun control groups like Michael Bloomberg, Reid Hoffman, they have private security with firearms. How ironic and hypocritical. But law-abiding citizens who can't afford private security, they lose their ability to defend themselves, their families, and their homes. Criminals, this is what I don't understand how it's so clear, dude. It's so clear to me that they are trying to take our weapons away to disarm the population, not for criminal activity, because criminals are going to acquire weapons no matter what. That's why they're criminals, because the weapons they have acquired, they probably shouldn't have in the first place because they're felons. So these laws don't apply to criminals, folks. They apply to us law-abiding citizens. That's who they're trying to disarm. Criminals don't follow gun laws. That's what makes them criminals. Like I said, these laws don't affect the gang member who's already carrying the illegal weapon. They don't affect the drug dealer who got his gun from a fucking black market. And they don't affect the mentally unstable person who's determined to hurt people. These laws affect the Marine veteran who keeps an AR-15 for home defense. They affect the single mother who carries a handgun for protection. They affect law-abiding citizens who've done nothing wrong. And according to FBI data, rifles of all types, not just AR-15s, account for only 6% of gun homicides. The vast majority are committed with handguns. If this were really about reducing violence, they'd be going after handguns, but they're not, because that would be politically suicidal. This isn't about safety, folks. It's about pure control. And I'll say what a lot of people are thinking, but won't say it out loud. The Second Amendment exists specifically so that people have the means to resist tyranny. The founders put it in there because they'd just fought a revolution against a government that tried to disarm them. And when you look at what's happening in this country, the corruption, the consolidation of power, the surveillance state, the silencing of dissent, you start to understand why certain politicians want an unarmed population. And I'm not calling for a revolution by any means. I pray it never comes to that. But the right to bear arms is what keeps that option on the table, and some people in power want to take that option away. And quite frankly, folks, I'm actively looking to move to a red state. And I know that I said that I'm neither Republican nor Democrat, but I like the President Trump. I like the majority of what he's doing. And I think that he's a great president. Far better than the last one that we had. And so, again, I'm seriously, actively looking to move to a red state where I can exercise my Second Amendment rights as they were intended. I served this country as a Marine. I shouldn't have to leave my home state to keep the rights that I fought for. On February 6th, Spanberger signed her first 4 pieces of legislation. All bills putting constitutional amendments on the ballot. Amendment 1, Marriage Equality. This would remove Virginia's 2006 constitutional ban on same-sex marriage. The Supreme Court's Obergefell decision already made that ban unenforceable, but this would officially remove it from Virginia's Constitution. Amendment 2, Reproductive Rights. This would enshrine access to abortion, contraception, and IVF in Virginia's Constitution. Amendment 3, Voting Rights Restoration. This would automatically restore voting rights for people who've completed felony sentences. Amendment 4, Mid-Decade Congressional Redistricting, Gerrymandering. This would let the Democratic-controlled legislature redraw congressional maps before the 2026 midterms. Democrats have already released a proposed 10-to-1 map. 10 Democrat seats, 1 Republican. How convenient for them. This is blatant gerrymandering and is facing legal challenges. So let me share my perspective on the marriage issue. I'm not a Christian. I am struggling with faith. I am struggling with religion. I've read many religious texts, one being the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu text, and I find it fascinating because it talks about the war between oneself within oneself. And it really resonated with me. But I'm also grew up around Christianity. And I respect Christian values. And I believe that this country was founded on Christian values to a degree. The Constitution may not mention God, but the Declaration of Independence does, 4 times. Laws of nature and of nature's God, endowed by their Creator, supreme judge of the world, and divine providence. The founders, whatever their individual beliefs, acknowledged a higher power as the source of our rights. On same-sex marriage specifically, here's where I land. People are going to do what they want to do. Adults make their own choices. I'm not trying to stop anyone from living their life. But here's what I don't understand. If you are in a same-sex marriage and you claim to be a Christian, that's conflicting. That's hypocritical. The Bible is pretty clear on this issue. You can interpret it different ways, I guess, but the traditional understanding is what it is. You can't claim to follow a faith while living in direct contradiction to its teachings. Either you believe it or you don't. Pick one. That's not hate. That's just consistency. And so where this is heading, folks, let me step back and look at the bigger picture here. So Abigail Spanberger has been in office for less than a month. In that time, she has terminated state-level cooperation with federal immigration authorities. She has positioned Virginia to become effectively a sanctuary state, which will be the icing on the cake for me to fucking leave here. You don't want that to happen, folks. Look at what's happening in New York. Look at fucking California. Look at all the sanctuary states and how they're just crumbling. And to my fellow Virginians, if that happens, this state is going to become unrecognizable and unsafe. She watched her party pass the most aggressive gun control package in state history. She signed bills putting progressive constitutional amendments on the ballot. She's taken on the Trump administration in multiple lawsuits, accepted money from a CCP, Chinese Communist Party, connected businessmen while claiming to be a national security hawk, taken corporate inaugural money from companies she supposedly opposed. The woman who campaigned as a moderate is governing as a progressive. The woman who touts her CIA credentials took money from someone connected to the Chinese Communist Party. The woman who claimed to reject corporate money took money from Dominion, Austria, and Amazon the moment she won. The woman who claims to care about public safety is actively preventing law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration authorities. I see a pattern here, and it concerns me. Now, I'm going to be fair. Not everything Trump administration is doing is perfect. Nobody's perfect, okay? No administration is perfect. But I look at what he's trying to do, and I see someone trying to restore common sense. Secure the border. Deport people who are here illegally, which is a crime. Cut wasteful spending. Weed out corruption. Hold people accountable. These aren't radical ideas. These are things that most Americans, regardless of party, used to agree on. 20 years ago, even Democrats supported secure borders. Bill Clinton talked tough on illegal immigration. Barack Obama deported more people than any president before him. This wasn't a partisan issue. And I'm sure that that's a fact that very few people are recognizing. So remember that. Barack Obama deported more people than any president before him. But something changed. The Democratic Party moved so far left that common sense positions are now called extreme. Wanting to enforce immigration law is called racist. Wanting to keep your constitutional right is called dangerous. And again, I'm not a Republican, but right now, I agree with most of what Trump's administration is doing. Not because I'm some partisan hack, but because it's common sense. and I look at Spanberger, and I see someone who's going to turn Virginia into California. High taxes, sanctuary policies, gun restrictions, one-party rule through gerrymandering. I pray that this does not happen. But if those 5 bills pass the legislature and Virginia becomes a sanctuary state, if the gun laws go into effect and law-abiding citizens lose their rights, if the redistricting amendment passes and Democrats lock in permanent majority control, then my ass is out of here. I'm moving to a red state where I can live according to my values, keep my rights, and not be governed by people who take money from the Communist Party of China while claiming to be national security experts. So having said, look, I've given you a lot of information here, maybe more than you wanted, but I think Virginians deserve to know who's actually running their state. Abigail Spanberger isn't the moderate she claims to be. Her voting record proves it. Her donor list proves it. Her actions as governor prove it. She taught at a school called Terror High and didn't mention it on her campaign material until she got caught. She took $50,000 from a Chinese Communist Party connected businessman while touting her CIA credentials. She claimed to reject corporate money, then took corporate money for her inauguration. She voted against the Laken Riley Act, then made one of the first acts as a governor to prevent cooperation with ICE. She's going to sign laws that make millions of law-abiding Virginians into potential criminals for owning the same firearms that were perfectly illegal yesterday. These aren't conspiracy theories, folks. These are documented facts. Public records, voting records, campaign finance disclosures. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm giving you the information so you can think for yourself. But I will tell you what I think. This woman has ulterior motives. She's beholden to out-of-state billionaires and progressive donors. She doesn't represent Virginia's values. And if she gets her way, this state is going to be unrecognizable in a few short years. And I pray that I am wrong. I really, really do. I love Virginia. It's been my home my entire life. Except for a couple years while I was in the Marine Corps. I got sober here. My family is here. But I am watching closely, and if things go the way that I think they're going, I will be looking for a new home elsewhere, out of Virginia. A place where the Second Amendment rights still mean something, where illegal means illegal, where you don't have to worry about your governor taking money from the Chinese Communist Party. And I would argue that many Virginians probably feel the same. So, this is factual information, folks. So please, take this seriously, because this is serious matters. If she has her way, we're not going to recognize the state that we live in today in a few years, folks. Okay? So, having said, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening to The Manufactured Mind. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay free. It's Robey. Have a wonderful day, and until next time, stay safe, stay aware, walk tall, stay frosty, and semper fidelis. Peace out.